With that, we're going to get our program kicked off, and we'll start with Pete Maysmith from the League of Conservation Voters.
Thanks so much, Megan. Glad to be here today. As Megan said, my name is Pete Maysmith. I'm the Senior Vice President for Campaigns for LCV, or the League of Conservation Voters. And importantly for this call, I'm also a Coloradan. We're joined today by remarkable leaders, elected leaders and others in Colorado who are going to talk about their experience around the Marshall Fire and just the urgent need for climate action. I think we already knew before these horrific, devastating, disorienting, tragic, this fire, we already knew how urgent the need was, how essential it was that we take action and we take action now. I was sitting around my living room with my oldest daughter when the fire started to really attract attention, and just to understand at this time of year what was happening to folks that we know and to folks that we love was terrible. And the people on this call are going to be able to speak about it certainly even more directly than I can. But the answer is action on climate, specifically Congress working to do that, of course, through President Biden's Build Back Better, which is obviously already passed the House. Thank you, Representative Neguse. And that actually is the segue. I want to bring Joe Neguse, Representative Joe Neguse, on. We couldn't ask for a better leader in the United States Congress on climate change, period, full stop. He is someone that wakes up every day and thinks about how to make the case to move forward, to bring more clean energy jobs, to lower energy costs for families, and to address things like the devastation of the Marshall Fire. He's a friend of mine, and he's someone that I am so lucky to get to work with, and we all are lucky to have as such a leader as a representative in the House from Colorado. So with that, I could say a lot more. Representative Neguse, I hope that's enough for the moment. I want to turn it over to you. And again, thank you for all of your leadership.
It's more than enough. It's certainly plenty. Thank you, Pete. And of course, appreciate the kind words, and a pleasure to be able to join you, and grateful for all that LCV, the League of Conservation Voters, has done in terms of just really, in my view, offering a clarion call for the need to take climate change seriously and to act on climate before it's too late. Thank you, of course, to everyone for joining us today. I want to start by thanking Mayor Brockett for his leadership, and Mayor Stolzman in particular for her leadership during the devastating Marshall Fire, all that she has done to bring our community together in the wake of the recovery process. She has worked tirelessly day in, day out, and her and the incredible public servants who work for the city of Louisville, and of course, Mayor Folsom of the city of Superior, town of Superior rather, should be applauded for all that they have done during some pretty difficult circumstances to help their communities recover from this disaster. Our district, the 2nd Congressional District, has been hit hard time and again by historic wildfires over the course of the last several years. And each year we shatter once-in-a-lifetime records. The Marshall Fire is a stark reminder of how wildfire season is a thing of the past, and fires are now a year-round threat. And moreover, that the wildland-urban interface, the WUI as it's often referred to, is far larger than anyone had ever anticipated, given the unique and destructive force that the Marshall Fire was, fueled by hurricane winds, exacerbated by months of drought and historic dry conditions. As we know, this fire, the most destructive in Colorado history, destroyed over 1,000 homes, left countless Coloradans, our neighbors, our friends, starting down a long road to recovery. In Boulder and across the 2nd District, similar to many other communities throughout the country, we are experiencing the impacts of the climate crisis in real time in our own backyards through more intense, more life-threatening, more severe climate-fueled extreme weather events. The Marshall Fire follows the historic 2020 wildfire season. And again, I never imagined that I would say this, that 2020, in which we had the Cameron Peak Fire, the largest fire in the history of Colorado, 137 years, and the East Troublesome Fire, the 2nd largest wildfire in the history of Colorado. Both happened simultaneously, a mere few miles apart from each other. Over 400,000 acres burned. Never imagined that that would be followed a year later by the most destructive fire in our history, the Marshall Fire. So if we needed any reminder that the climate crisis is here and now, we have it. And the impacts are all around us. And our communities can't wait any longer for bold, urgent action. I hear that every day from constituents, from neighbors, from colleagues, from our mayors, from local leaders who have had enough and are ready for Congress to take action, because Coloradans are paying the price of climate inaction. And the truth is, Congress has the power to do something about this. You heard Pete reference this moments ago. We're very close, closer than we've ever been, to delivering much needed transformational climate action. And we cannot let this opportunity pass us by, because Coloradans and millions of Americans are counting on us. So in my view, we have to act quickly. We've got to act boldly to protect communities like my own that are still picking up the pieces of what is left of their homes and their businesses. The Build Back Better Act, which Pete referenced, is, of course, a bold climate action plan that I think meets this moment. Without getting into all the details of the bill, suffice to say that the investments in clean energy and fire prevention will certainly lessen the devastation that Coloradans are dealing with right now and into the future. And as was mentioned, the bill passed the House several months ago. It passed with an overwhelming majority of the House Democratic Caucus, and the Senate has the opportunity to help communities like mine that have been hit the hardest by doing the right thing and making sure that those climate provisions are enacted as part of a Build Back Better program in the United States Senate. If we don't have the political willpower to act, as our communities are on fire and flooding and experiencing record heat and drought, then ultimately we'll be failing future generations. And that's simply something that I'm not prepared to let happen. So again, thank you all for joining us today. Communities like Boulder, Louisville, Superior, Lafayette, Colorado needs the Congress to take these steps, and I'll continue to work each and every day to make it happen. And with that, I will turn it back over to our host, our moderator.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Mayor Aaron Brockett.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Just want to say that what happened in Boulder County last month was just incredibly devastating. Thousands of families lost their homes, their possessions, their memories, their peace of mind to the fires. And the level of loss was so catastrophic, it's impossible to put it into words. But this was a time when, as Joe mentioned, once again, we came face to face with the devastating cost of climate inaction. We've seen terrible fires in the past, and this was one that exceeded all of our expectations. We know that what happened in Boulder County and unincorporated Boulder County and in Louisville and Superior, it's not going to stop here. The science is clear. Families across Colorado and the country are going to continue to feel deadly impacts of the climate crisis like this unless we act now. And as Congressman Neguse mentioned, we need our leaders in Washington, D.C. to take immediate and bold climate action to protect communities like ours from more frequent and severe wildfires and the many other climate disasters that we'll see if we don't take that kind of action. Just some facts on the Marshall Fire. It burned more than 6,000 acres of Boulder County in less than 24 hours. In the wake of destruction was just something that no community should be forced to go through. There were over 1,000 homes and businesses were burned. And these were in neighborhoods that no one expected to be vulnerable to wildfire, right? They were neighborhoods that people thought were safe from this kind of disaster. And yet those over 1,000 homes and businesses burned, and the estimate on the damage is $800 to $1.6 billion in damages to people's homes, which ranks it as the 10th costliest fire in United States history. So I'm fortunate that my family and our neighbors here in the city of Boulder were spared, but so many other families lost absolutely everything. There are heartbreaking stories of couples losing their homes and their businesses to the flames, of families losing their beloved pets and fighting to find missing loved ones. It's just heart-wrenching. But what has been inspiring is watching Coloradans come together to help our neighbors. So I'm incredibly grateful for the brave acts from our firefighters and first responders, from utility crews. We saw a moving story about Louisville utility crews keeping the water running in their city. And so watching these families and friends and neighbors lend a helping hand has been incredibly inspiring. But we can't fix this on our own. We don't have the resources at the local level to fix these problems. We need the help from the federal government. And if Congress doesn't go big on climate action now, our families in Boulder and across the country and the world will be trapped in an unending cycle of terrible climate disasters. So I'm grateful to be here today to talk about how what we really need next is the Build Back Better Act passed, because it's our last best chance to deliver big, bold climate solutions that we desperately need. And the Marshall Fire is just one example of how climate change has hurt us locally and in Colorado here. So ambitious investments like this in climate action and clean energy will bring jobs to Colorado and lower energy costs while preventing these kinds of climate disasters in the future. So I'm very grateful to Joe for his work in the House and for them passing with a strong majority the Build Back Better Act. And now it's time for the Senate to step up and finish the job. So while this time it was Boulder County, Colorado, that suffered, it's only a matter of time until climate crises like these hit all parts of our society and our country. So the vast majority of Americans recognize this and support bold climate action. So the Build Back Better Act would be a direct response to these demands that we have for this kind of climate action and serve as a critical foundation for more action that we would then partner with on a local and state level in Colorado during this period of rebuilding. So I strongly urge the Senate to move quickly to pass these important, critical climate investments and get it done. Thanks so much for your time. And with that, I will turn it back to our moderator. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear from Mayor Stolzman.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mayor Ashley Stolzman from the city of Louisville, and I just want to thank everyone for joining to discuss the impact of the climate crisis. This is urgent. We need to start talking so that we can curb the worsening consequences. The climate crisis isn't some far-off threat. It's here right now, and it's growing more dangerous every single day. In my town, instead of prepping for New Year's celebrations and having fun with family members and loved ones in the end of December, people spent the last days of 2021 watching our homes, our businesses, our community burn in the most destructive wildfire in state history. On December 30th, I was among the over 35,000 people in my community displaced from the fire. I didn't go to bed until the early morning hours on the 31st, and I laid down on a sofa in the basement of my relative. I didn't know if my home was still there or not, and I just was, thinking through what had to be done in the days ahead. And even in that early morning hour when the fire was still not out, my mind was abundantly clear, and it was consumed with the urgency of carbon emission reduction. We have to reduce our emissions. In Boulder County, over 1,000 homes and businesses were completely destroyed. This leaves families without shelter and business owners without their life's work. Many more homes were severely damaged. That's projected to leave even more people displaced for months. Our community water distribution system, it was damaged. Still today, over 80 homes that were not destroyed are unable to access safe drinking water. As a community, we continue to mourn our losses and grieve, but Louisville is a very strong community and we will build back better. I am incredibly firm in my commitment to rebuild and protect our community from the worsening climate crisis. Recently, I met President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden. Governor Polis was there and members of our congressional delegation, including Congressman Neguse, and they talked to us about how we can rebuild our community. The president assured me that the federal government and FEMA in particular will support Colorado and our local government in our recovery until the process is done. And I can't tell you how eternally grateful I really am for that. A critical element of our recovery that we absolutely cannot overlook is that we must address the factors that caused the devastating fires in the first place. It is abundantly clear. A fire of this magnitude in the middle of winter is an alarming threat that we need to not ignore. We must take immediate action, or year-round catastrophic fires and other events will become our normal. Never, even during wildfire season, has our community seen such devastation. I know my fellow mayors and state leaders are doing their best to combat worsening climate crisis by reducing our carbon footprint. In Louisville, all of our municipal facilities, all of the electric needs for those are being met with 100% carbon-free electricity. And last year, our city council adopted the 2021 International Energy Efficiency Code, and we even added in an additional provision to require new residential buildings to be net zero. But our community acting alone in these ways will not resolve this global threat. We need system-wide change to protect our future. The Build Back Better Act has historic investments that are absolutely necessary to jumpstart our transition to a clean energy economy. There'll be good paying jobs that will help sustain families while combating the worsening effects of climate change. We're so close to delivering on this. We just absolutely need our senators to get it over the finish line. If there's one thing I've learned in my time as mayor, it's that the people of Louisville are incredibly resilient. I know we will rebuild. I know that we will support our neighbors and one another to get through this difficult time. I'm going to do everything in my power to fight for a safer future for the community and communities all around the country and world who are facing the wrath of climate change. I'm here today to remind leaders in Congress that climate crisis isn't a future issue. It's here now. Our generation can do this, and we have no other choice. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Lauren Gifford to add her comments.
Thanks, Mayor Stolzman. Hi, I'm Lauren Gifford. I am a human environment geographer, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Arizona, but I work from my home here in Louisville, my home office in Old Town Louisville. And I'm also affiliate faculty at Metropolitan State University in Denver. I have, or as a person who's been studying climate change for 15 years, and human environment interactions for 15 years, this fire was a stark reminder to me of what climate inaction looks like. I've said this many times over the last few weeks, but this fire was not a fluke. This fire is the future. We will see many more catastrophic hazards and extreme weather events as time goes on. This is really, really sad to say, and I'm trying not to cry here while I talk about it, but this is the reality of a changing climate in this moment. We understand, scientists understand climate change as what's called a threat multiplier, and it exacerbates and compounds existing natural hazards like long-term drought, like an acute lack of precipitation, like rapid temperature fluctuations, all these things that we were experiencing here on the Front Range. And we need policies, we need institutions and support structures in place that address human vulnerability to extreme events, that support measures to help us respond to adapt to, and to mitigate climate change. We need resources and support for communities as we react to these extreme events, as we build back from them, and as we deal with the collective trauma that our community and every community around us is feeling right now. We're lucky here in Boulder County. We have these, fantastic elected officials who are committed to addressing anthropogenic climate change. But so much more needs to be done, particularly at the state and federal level. I'm hoping the reality of climate change and humans' continued role in perpetuating it can be addressed rapidly and effectively. We need to stop talking and we need to act. We need to act with all hands on deck right now. This is not a hypothetical scenario. This is the climate crisis, And we need support for renewable energy infrastructure. We need job creation in the clean energy sector. We need support for a just transition away from fossil fuels and the communities that economically depend upon them, with many of them in Colorado. And we don't want those folks in those communities left behind, but we need to move ahead. And the Build Back Better offers us this. So I'm hopeful that we can accomplish this, but we need much more political and much more financial support to get there. Thanks.
Great. Thank you all so much for sharing with us. Now we're going to open it for questions. If you're a reporter, feel free to raise your hand or drop your question in the chat, and we'll unmute you to ask your question.
Well, I guess I'm unmuted, but hey, this is Blair Miller from Channel 7 in Denver. I guess I just wanted to ask the collective group here. Obviously, Senators Bennett and Hickenlooper are on board with this whole thing. How do you guys feel about watching what's happening in the Senate right now, especially regarding the filibuster? If the Republicans aren't going to get on board with this, what other solutions might be out there? And is there anything that you're thinking about as you've watched this all unfold over the past few months?
Yeah, hey Blair, happy to take that on and then defer to Ashley or Aaron if they have anything they'd like to add. We're grateful for Senator Bennett and Senator Hickenlooper's partnership and their support of the climate provisions of the Build Back Better bill, which were well vetted and have been developed through an intensive stakeholder process for the better part of almost a year. Obviously, we're disheartened by the decisions of some senators in the United States Senate, and in particular, of course, in the Republican side, but also in the Democratic caucus, in terms of their unwillingness to agree to the broad proposal that was passed by the House. All that being said, I think we have to keep trying, right? Failure isn't an option. And I can tell you that there are certainly conversations happening with Senator Manchin, for example, Senator Sinema, and various House members and the White House, all engaged in thoughtful negotiation to try to revive the Build Back Better program, perhaps through a different framework, but one that nonetheless still meets the moment, and particular as it relates to climate, still ultimately ensures that those climate provisions are left intact. I always viewed the Build Back Better bill fundamentally as a climate bill because of the significant investments that were made in that bill for climate action, many of which we authored, the Climate Conservation Corps, which is really a kind of Colorado concept, obviously modeled after the 1930s era program, which is a big component of the climate part of the Build Back Better bill. So we worked very hard on those proposals, and my sense is there's wide consensus around the climate provisions, and unfortunately there are some other matters that have kind of gotten in the way. My hope is that we can recommit ourselves to getting it done and do so before the President's State of the Union. So that's my goal. That's what I'm working towards, and I suspect that's what my colleagues in Congress are working on as well.
I always feel the need to add that, bills like Build Back Better are so important, but the atmosphere doesn't care about politics, and it doesn't care about the drama and, interhuman contention. It really cares about and responds to the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So I hope we can come up with a solution quickly to addressing those emissions, whatever that may be.
And I'll just add, thanks for that, Lauren, that we've seen, some bills fail recently in the Senate yesterday, but my plea to the Senate would be that the climate crisis is of such a magnitude and urgency for our society, our world, that at least they can find some way to pass the climate provisions of the Build Back Better bill, if nothing else. This is a desperate plea because we need it so terribly badly.
Well, I'll ask a quick little follow-up then. Representative Neguse, has there been any talks about separating the bills out and going back to like a conference committee just to get the climate provisions passed?
There has. The challenge is that the Build Back Better bill, at its core, as Blair, is a reconciliation bill, right? The bill essentially uses the reconciliation process that's provided for under Senate rules. And so there are some challenges with breaking it up because you have to do it in a way that it still comports with the very archaic rules of the Senate and as it relates to the budget reconciliation process. But yes, fundamentally, a lot of the conversations that are happening and germinating right now are around whether or not we could pursue an iterative version of Build Back Better. So, a version of the bill that all 50 Democratic United States senators and every member of the House Democratic Caucus can agree upon. And I am optimistic that we can, in fact, do that.
Blair, this is Pete Maysmith. Just as we're waiting for the next question, I would just add, I mean, you know, everything Representative Neguse said is entirely spot on. I also think it's noteworthy that in President Biden's press conference yesterday, when he was asked about Build Back Better, specifically called out the clean energy, environmental, climate provisions, and the, you know, as a space of potential agreement. And you know, a place to kind of use to build on to move forward. So I think it's noteworthy that the president, you know, called that out yesterday.
Yeah, I agree. I also, there's a question in the chat that I think is just worth addressing, which was around home hardening and defensible space, which is certainly an area that I do think needs significant scale up in terms of investment. And the good news is that we actually were able to do that, at least in part, in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And that most of that, the money that was in the bipartisan infrastructure bill will go directly to kind of wildfire resiliency, mitigation, forest management work on federal lands. But there is a component of Build Back Better, the $28 billion roughly that Senator Bennett and I have worked on together to ultimately move the ball forward on wildfire resiliency and mitigation, which includes funds that would be made available on a local grant basis for home hardening, by way of example. So I think that's something that's very important for us to get done, and it's in the bill, and so we just gotta get the bill across the finish line in order to make it happen.
Representative Neguse, I appreciate you raising that. Unfortunately, I don't think it's very specific in the now bipartisan infrastructure law. It doesn't really state it has to be, you know, home hardening and defensible space within 100 feet from a structure. Dr. Jack Cohen has done really good research on this, and really outside of 100 feet from a structure will not stop a weather-driven fire, vegetation removal rather. So it'd be really great if, you know, in these next round of talks with the Build Back Better, if we could really focus on getting people's homes hardened and making sure defensible space outside of 100 feet, you know, that's a great job creator right there. But I think we really need to be more specific in the language, because it's not defined enough in the current bipartisan infrastructure law.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. And I think the bipartisan infrastructure bill was really targeted around, again, federal land. And so it's just not kind of a different paradigm, right? When we're talking about national forest land, national parks, deferred maintenance, and so forth. But the Build Back Better plan, so just not to get into the weeds here on it, but that 28 billion that I referenced, originally it was 40 billion. It got winnowed down to 28 billion in the final framework of Build Back Better. But it includes, for example, a large plus up of the Firewise program, which has been incredibly successful at the local level. These are dollars made available to cities like Boulder and Lafayette, Louisville, to the county governments, to be able to directly provide homeowners with the resources needed to do exactly what you're describing. But I certainly agree with you that more specificity is always helpful, and something we should aim for as we hope to get that piece of the bill across the finish line.
Thank you, Congressman. I just want to add something there on that. So with the home hardening piece, I just want people to understand how important this is and how grateful we are to you and Senator Bennett for getting things like that in there for grants for families. In this case, in our town, I found out the town of Superior, the fire had reached the town of Superior, which is across a 6-lane highway, which is adjacent to a 2-lane road and a giant parking lot for a big box store. That is a lot of concrete between their town and my town. that is a pretty defensible sounding space in normal fire terms. It's a huge distance of impervious surface that has other problems that we could talk about another day. But the fire did not care about all of that concrete. The wind was blowing so fast and there was so much debris and material in that wind that it carried the embers across all of that concrete from one town into the next, across a municipal golf course, which is probably the most mowed and most watered property anywhere in my entire city, and was able to destroy the entire neighborhood after that and tear through it. And firefighters fought hard in that neighborhood, and it was unbelievable to see fire hoses on the ground where they had to drop their hoses and run out of the neighborhood to save their own lives after they tried their hardest to save the properties. So this home hardening, this would create funds for homeowners to be able to choose fire resistant materials when they rebuild or reside or things like that. This is critical, and we need these kinds of funds to help our communities, because individual homeowners can't bear the burden alone for the increased costs that we're all suffering from climate. So thank you to your leadership, Congressman, for putting these kinds of things in there. And we just all need to work together to get it across the line. And I'm happy to have anyone from the country come to my town, and I'll talk to them about this if it helps. So anything we can do in Louisville to help, we will, because this is so critically important.
Thank you. I know we're running short on time, so we have one more question for Representative Neguse. If folks have follow-up questions, please feel free to email and we'll try to get those answered. This question is from Gabrielle Franklin at Fox 31. She wants to know, are there any plans to break out some of the climate action portions of the Build Back Better plan after seeing other bills fail to make it out of the Senate this week? Which portions of Build Back Better as it relates to climate change is the most urgent?
Great question. Dovetails with the question that Blair posed. So the short answer is yes. I think there is a emerging consensus in Washington that we need to find a way to pass an iterative version of Build Back Better, and a version that ultimately can earn the necessary majority to make it to the president's desk. My sense is that there is wide consensus that most of the climate provisions that were in the framework that the House passed and that the Senate initially agreed to, or the majority of the Senate rather, that there's consensus that those provisions can survive. That includes the Climate Conservation Corps, it includes the forest funding and fire prevention, wildfire mitigation, resiliency funding that I described. It includes the investment on the R&D side for our federal labs. It includes the electric vehicle investments, although there's some negotiations to be had about some of the contours of that particular program. So, I'm optimistic, but it's going to take a lot of hard work. And I think we've got to figure out a way to, kind of get back to the negotiating table and find the places where we can ultimately reach agreement and then move forward and get it done. Because you've heard today from our mayors that the how high the stakes are and how necessary action is at the federal level. So that's our focus. In terms of prioritizing the different provisions of the bill, I don't know that I would necessarily opine on that quite yet. I think I want to get to a place where we have some more conversations amongst our colleagues in the Senate and in the House, and then hopefully be in a position to move forward.
Great, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who's joined the call today. I think this was a really impactful call, and it comes at such an important moment. If folks have questions, I've dropped my email in the chat. It's megan@climatepower.us. But with that, we'll let everyone get back to their days.